I'll do it. Mr. President.
Senator from Tennessee is recognized.
Thanks, Mr. President. The distinguished senator from New Hampshire and I are going to engage in a discussion about the vote that we're going to have at 10:40, but the Republican leader is on his way to the floor in a few minutes, and when he comes, we're going to step aside and let him make his remarks, and then we'll resume. Mr. President, the vote we're having at 10:40 has the following problems with it. Number one, it's $10 billion for the state to pay for teachers. That sounds pretty good, except that it ties the hands of the governors and the legislature so they can't change education funding levels if their state budgets are in trouble. And second, it's $16 billion for state to pay for Medicaid. That sounds pretty good too, except that it ties the hands of the states and the governors so they can't adjust their state Medicaid programs and continue to face a funding cliff. I heard the distinguished senator from Washington State talk about college students. Well, the reason California students are facing a 34% increase in tuition is largely caused by California's expenses for Medicaid, the state program that is funded also by the federal government that has so many federal rules that it keeps going up in cost, and the money that would be going for the University of California or the University of Tennessee or the University of New Hampshire instead goes for Medicaid, and then there's not money for the university, and then what happens? The tuition goes up. And finally, this is part of the way this bill is paid for, is by $10 billion of permanent taxes on multinational corporations that would have the effect of driving jobs overseas. Just one more action by the Democratic majority in this administration in the middle of a recession or a time of 10% unemployment that makes it harder to create new jobs in the United States. Now, I would ask my friend if I may ask consent that the senator and I can engage in a colloquy.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would ask my friend from New Hampshire, the senior member of the Budget Committee and the former governor of a state, what about the idea of sending money to states and then requiring them, in effect, to spend more money at a time when most states are cutting state budgets so they can balance their budgets?
Well, I think the senator from Tennessee, who not only is a former governor, but is also the former Secretary of Education, has really framed the question adequately and very accurately. And that is this: why should the federal government be saying to the states, we're going to give you some money, but we're going to attach to this money a whole lot of strings. And the basic strings are these: that unless you spend a heck of a lot more money, you're not going to get this money. And it does appear that it is focused on a special interest group, does it not? The teachers' unions. It appears that this is more or less a commitment to take care of this constituency out there at the expense, ironically, of a lot of people who are employed in those states. You know, we use the term multinational corporation around here like there's some sort of evil empire. Well, I got a few multinational corporations in New Hampshire. I suspect you do in Tennessee. And they employ people.
If I may,
and if you raise their taxes by $10 billion, they're going to employ a lot less, or they're going to send them overseas. We used to hear around here constantly about outsourcing jobs. This is a job outsourcer, this bill.
Well, the senator is exactly right. The National Association of Manufacturers says that there are 22 million Americans who are hired by companies that do business not only in the United States but overseas. I would say to the senator from New Hampshire, I think we want companies who are principally in the United States who do business overseas, because what's the alternative? The alternative is they're in Singapore, or they're in Great Britain, or they're in other countries around the world, and they're not in our country. They're not paying taxes here, and they're not hiring people here. I see the distinguished senator from Kentucky has arrived, and the senator from New Hampshire and I are in the midst of a fascinating discussion, but we think we'll step down while you make your remarks.
Go ahead and finish your fascinating
Well, I want to get back to the essence of what you're saying, because I think it really goes to this point. Because, you know, people look at this and they say, oh, my goodness, there's a whole bunch of money that's coming to the state. But what's it really coming for? I mean, and who's really paying for it? I mean, this money doesn't appear on trees and get picked up in the morning by trucks that drive by and dropped off at the state. This money is taken from somebody else to be used for this purpose. And when you go to the essence of what this bill is about, it's to pay off education unions. I mean, that's what this is about. I mean, let's not be coy about what's happening around here. The education unions are the single biggest interest group represented at the Democratic National Convention. I think 26% of the delegates at the Democratic National Convention were teachers, members of teachers' unions. They probably weren't teachers, they were probably administrators. And so what's happening here? Well, a lot of states are trying to reorganize their budgets because they're in hard times. And most states are not able to print money, none are, the way the federal government does, so they actually have to be fiscally disciplined. So what they're saying to all the different categories within their states is, we're going to adjust here. And they're actually going through a very aggressive, I know it's happening in New Hampshire, I know it's happening in Tennessee, I suspect it's happening in most states. They're going through a very aggressive process of ordering priorities and making tough decisions so that they can get their house in order relative to things like the cost of education. But that has upset the teachers' unions. And so now we get a bill on the floor of the Senate to basically put the states in a position where they will have to maintain the teachers' union status relative to employees and actually add to it at the expense of the employers in those states, of the people and the people who go to work in those states, at the expense of the companies that are deemed multinationals. Well, in New Hampshire, we've got a lot of companies that are multinational. We're quite proud of that. We're proud of the fact that we're an export-oriented state, that a lot of our major employers, in fact, I suspect our top 5 major employers are all deemed multinationals. Well, they're not going to be able to hire as many people in New Hampshire because of the fact that they're going to get hit with this huge tax bill, the purpose of which isn't actually to improve the situation. The states are working on that. The purpose of which is to take care of a constituency group that happens to have significant amount of influence. It's called a special interest, unless it happens to be a liberal group, and then they're called concerned citizens or something. But in this case, it's a special interest group. And this bill is nothing more than a payoff to a special interest group at the expense of another group who happens to employ people and have workers in New Hampshire.
The senator's been talking about education. There's another important part of the bill, $16 billion to Medicaid. This is the federal program that now, with the new health care law, more than 60 million people will belong to. But here is what the bill also does. According to the Wall Street Journal article on May 20th, because of this bill, and as a result of this bill, if it should pass, states will be limited in their ability to make changes in the Medicaid program to save money. So what does that mean? That means
Are you saying that the federal government's going to say, you've got to take this, if you want this money, you can't improve the program?
Not just me saying it, Senator Gregg. The Lieutenant Governor of New York, Richard Ravitch, wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal on June 7th where he said he greatly appreciated the stimulus money, and this is the same problem. But because of these requirements that prohibit governors and legislatures from making changes in the law to save money, he says, quote, the net result is this: the federal stimulus, and this bill is just the son of stimulus or the daughter of stimulus. The federal stimulus has led states to increase overall spending in these core areas, to increase spending. So the point of what we're doing here is cause states to increase spending, says Lieutenant Governor of California, which in effect has only raised the height of the cliff from which state spending will fall if stimulus funds evaporate.
For comment. I was not here for the beginning of the discussion between the senator from New Hampshire and the senator from Tennessee, but recently had an opportunity to speak to the state legislators, the National State Legislators Convention, which happened to have been in my hometown of Louisville. Speaker Pelosi was there as well, and my staff, in doing the research and putting together my remarks, discovered that currently the single biggest source of revenue for state governments is the borrowed money that's coming down from Washington. They're getting more from us than they are from their sales taxes, from their income taxes, from their property taxes. The states are simply becoming completely dependent upon us. And as I heard both of my colleagues point out, we're sending this borrowed money down essentially so they don't have to make as tough a decisions as they would otherwise have to make. And so I would ask my friends, when does it end? When does this dependency come to an end? I thought it was last year supposed to be timely, temporary, and targeted.
Well, the senator's point is very important because 41 cents of every dollar that we're sending back to the states, and the senator says we're sending back a majority, and the majority of state money is now federal money, as the senator outlined. 41 cents is borrowed from China or from the Middle East. And our people are going to have to pay all this back. So, I mean, we don't have that money to be sending to the states. In this bill, at least there's an attempt to pay for it, but the way they pay for it is by penalizing job creators and forcing people to outsource jobs, which again comes back to harm us. For no purpose that seems to be practical other than to have the federal government step in and try to control the manner in which these various programs are run in the states and to reward constituencies who happen to be very supportive of the other party.
If I may say, in response to the question and comment from the senator from Kentucky, this country that was created by states, which then created a central government of limited powers, now has a central government that is making the states the wards of the central government. In the state of Tennessee this year, I believe for the first time, the dollars in the state budget are more than half dollars that come from the federal government. And in addition, do the dollars come from here? The rules come from here. So if the governor of Kentucky or New Hampshire or Tennessee is trying to say, Medicaid spending is out of control. It's ruining our public colleges and universities because we have no money left for them. So we want to change the eligibility. That's been the case during the last 10 years. We've had Medicaid spending going up in the states by 70 or 80% over a 7 or 8 year period of time, and funding for public universities at a low level, and tuitions therefore going way up. So the governor is saying, whoa, let's do something about Medicaid, and then we pass a bill and we say to the governors, don't you change Medicaid. You're not allowed, if you take this money, to save any money in Medicaid. So spending for Medicaid goes up because we require it to go up, and that means tuitions in Kentucky, New Hampshire, Tennessee, California, all across this country are going to be higher because of legislation like that we're considering today.
Well, I thank my friends from Tennessee and New Hampshire. I was going to make some opening comments here, but I would also add that we had my opening comments are somewhat related to the colloquy my colleagues were just having about the bill we'll be voting on here shortly. But we also heard an expression from the voters of Missouri yesterday who voted on a referendum on the issue of whether or not it's a good idea for the federal government to require individuals to retain health insurance. And 70% in Missouri just yesterday expressed their opposition to the notion. I know that's in court, it's being litigated now as to whether it's appropriate for the federal government or constitutional for the federal government to require everyone to have a government-prescribed health care policy. But we had an expression from the people of Missouri yesterday as well on that aspect of what the federal government's been doing here in the last year and a half, and I thank my colleagues for their enlightening comments. As I was just indicating, this morning's papers carry an important message